Hello everyone, it's Diane and I have a couple of books to share with you, some handmade journals. I'm pretty excited to show these to you because I love them. One is for a custom order and the other one will be going in my shop. So I'm going to start with the custom order, which is this one. It's called Happy Times. I love this little picture of a child in a clown costume, a piece of glue on there, with his dogs on a leash. It's such a cute book, and the title, Happy Times, just a good place to keep memories. And the customer that wants this book wants it to record childhood memories to share with her children and grandchildren. So I think that's a wonderful use of this book. I put some metal corners on it because it was pretty dog-eared. And it has canvas or twill type of fabric on the binding, and it has 3 signatures stitched in, some pretty crocheted trim. This old coloring book page is Mod Podged onto the back because there was a swirl of white paint on the back, and so I covered it up with that. And my customer said she plays the piano, so I just thought this little girl playing the piano on the back was perfect for that. And it's like I said, it's a vintage coloring book, very, very old and brittle, so I can't really do much with the pages anyway. So Mod Podging it protects it and gives me a chance to use it. Before I get into the book, I'm going to show this piece of ribbon that I'm going to be including with the book so she can use it any way she wants to. I bought this ribbon many, many years ago with no idea what I wanted to do with it. There were just so many things on this, and it's two-sided, that I used to like to do as a child that I had to have the ribbon. And I had it for years, and then I finally used it in one of my Smash books, and that was a few years ago. So I had this piece left over, and I don't know which of these phrases would evoke childhood memories of hers. Licking the spoon, obviously. I still do that. Skipping, clapping, leaf piles, flying a kite, sled rides. I didn't like scary faces, but I sure did play hide and seek a lot out where in the country where I lived. So I just thought I would include this, and she can use it the way she likes to in the book. And now I don't have any more of that ribbon. Okay, so once again I said there were 3 signatures in here, and I used this nice cardstock paper that I got at the Hobby Lobby clearance sale. It's Denim and Pearls was the name of the collection, and I think it's Paper Studio. And this paper was just perfect. And this is just some ivory cardstock that I border punched and glued along there. So there's vintage wrapping paper and wallpaper and feed sack fabric in this book, and I will point all of that out to you. And this is a piece of the vintage wallpaper, or wrapping paper, I mean. Isn't that cute? I used to love to jump rope. I'm not athletic, but jumping rope was my thing back in the day. And this is a little scrap of vintage wrapping paper also. It's just a blank index card tucked into the pocket. It's a little piece of trim stitched up there. She did not want any coffee dyeing, but she likes the crackly effect of the coffee dye. So I sprayed the pages, some of the pages, through a stencil. So that's what this is. There's a stamp. A fabric tab here. And vintage book pages are used throughout the book. Children's book pages. This is vintage ledger. One of my pink guest checks. Some pretty fabric collage here. This is sprayed. I use colored copy paper also. Since she didn't want me to copy dye, I thought that would give some interest to the plain papers. Here's vintage children's piano music. Skip to My Lou. She plays the piano and she wanted some musical reference in the book, so I included some of that. This is the graph paper that I sprayed, and this is crinkly, so I think she'll like that. Here's a piece of the vintage feed sack fabric. I just tore it into this shape and zigzag stitched it down, glued this little illustration out of a book and zigzagged some rickrack across the top to give it a little more stability at the top. And I tucked in a alterations tag. And while I'm on the page with the feed sack, I just want to remind you, if you didn't see the other video, the previous video that I made, that special deal has started today. And I know some of you ordered yesterday and said that the coupon didn't work, but that was because it was supposed to start today. But she said she will honor those coupons or those orders from yesterday as long as you mentioned me in my video here, my shop or whatever. As long as you mention me, she will give you the discount. So this is the Etsy shop, fabric, thread, needle. The deal runs from today through May 31st. You get 15% off a minimum $25 purchase with the coupon code Diane's Special. And I know some of you have already taken advantage of that, and so I thank you for going over there and giving Jennifer some business. And she has a really nice shop, so it's just awesome. So I hope some more of you will go on over and take advantage of that. Here's a flap that's sprayed. It's just a cut off from one of the papers, and I glued this little children's block on there. And this is just a page out of a children's primer, a spelling and vocabulary book. So it's not for journaling or anything. I just thought she would enjoy that. She said she likes primer books, so I included that. She also mentioned birds and leaves in the trees, so I put this little tag in here. There's a couple of birds here, bluebirds, and a pretty tree. And then this is a little Kate Greenaway drawing of Little Miss Muffet. Here's another page from a children's storybook, The Three Bears. She likes fairy tales. Vintage ledger, and then, oh, I have to glue this shut. I stitched the book together last night, but I forgot to glue the envelope shut. So this will be an envelope, and you can see where I stitched it into the middle of the book. And I didn't put anything in the pocket. That's for her to tuck something into. And then on the back of the envelope is another cutout from a vintage children's reader. And then the rest of the book follows the same pattern, but I want you to see the pictures. This is from a children's book, of course. Oh, we're still on the first signature. This is cut from a graphic 45 sheet of paper. I thought this was light enough she could journal on it if she wants to, or she can glue a picture. And this, of course, is from, they're from Mother Goose, these papers from graphic 45. And I just took my alterations tag and traced it onto the cardstock and then cut it out. And I put some of my long skinny tags in there. This is just a little strip of vintage wallpaper. And this is a piece of vintage wallpaper cut out with a 2-inch circle punch. Little tag tucked in there. And then this is a piece of the vintage sheet that I purchased at the flea market. It was a, what do you call them? With the elastic on the corners, fitted. It was a fitted sheet, and so I was cutting the elastic off so that I could cut the sheet up, and then I thought, well, this would make a really fun ruffle. So then I started cutting the elastic off with a bit of ruffle, you know, a bit of the sheet attached to it. So I just stitched it at the top there as a ruffle. So that's the first signature. Let me show you what the top of this book looks like. There's some fun stuff hanging off the top here. There's that sheet ruffle. So here's the second signature. Here's an illustration from Eloise Wilkin from a little golden book, and there's a piece of the really nice pink, like a braid, I guess, that I purchased at the flea market. There's a little scrap of vintage wallpaper, wrapping paper. And so of course I use this little girl because she's playing the piano. fabric tab. Crackly graph paper. I sprayed through a large paper doily for some of this. And here's just a lady cut from my 1961 Spiegel catalog, and I glued her to a guest check, so I thought maybe she could journal about her mother or her an aunt or something. And this paper has telephones, vintage telephones on the back, so I glued this. This is a feed sack piece also, and some crochet trim. And then I put this vintage telephone image from Graphic 45. I have a few pieces of communique, just these little pieces. Graphic 45 has some really neat papers, don't they? There's another flip with some of the little Mother Goose stamps. And again, another page from the vocabulary and spelling book. And then this little vintage card from Bird Bingo that I got at the flea market. Again, I have to glue this pocket shut, and there's a page from a children's reader. This page I had to include. It's something I found on Pinterest, I believe, and I printed it out. I love the colors. I used it in a previous book, but when she talked about birds and leaves rustling and stuff like that, I just thought I had to include this picture. So it's kind of large to put in a pocket, so I stitched it to some blue paper and then just stuck it in with paper clips. Here's another tag cut from Graphic 45 paper. This is another Graphic 45 kit, ABC primer. So I just stitched it to this piece of scrap paper and stitched it on as a pocket. Can't really journal on this because it's too dark, but I put tags in you can journal on. You could also glue a piece of paper on there to journal on, or you could just glue some pictures or something on it. Vintage wallpaper, Seesaw Marjorie Daw. Another piece of vintage wallpaper. I like this fabric. This is a plate. The whole fabric is full of decorative plates. And here's another fabric ruffle made with a selvage of a fabric. Oh, I was going to cover this up too. There's a barcode on here, so I'll probably find a illustration from a children's book to glue there. And here is an image from, I think it was Etude magazine, an old music magazine of a little girl playing the piano for her dolls. My customer also loves to read, and so I included this picture of a little girl sitting on the window seat on a rainy day reading books to her dolls. And there's a little kitten cut from vintage wrapping paper. Another book page, vintage ledger, fabric collage. Amaryllis is that music, and Waltz number 15 by Johann Brahms. Here's another piece of the feed sack, and there's some rickrack, vintage rickrack across the top, a little Eloise Wilkins cutie in the meadow. And then this is from a children's magazine, stitched to some of this sprayed paper. There's some clouds. I thought that was appropriate. She's out in the meadow, and most kids like to lay on the grass and look at the clouds and see what they could find. So I thought maybe she could journal about clouds if she wanted to there. Here's a vintage children's playing card and a math page from a children's math book. There's a Little Red Riding Hood, and another envelope and an illustration. Another Graphic 45 pocket, or a tag. I love that. And there's a farmhouse out in the country. Beautiful picture. That's an illustration from a children's book. Some vintage wallpaper. vintage wallpaper and a little vintage playing card that Gail sent me. Thank you, Gail. This is great for this book. And here's a tulle ruffle that I stitched up there. I had a little piece left over. Some graph paper and a piece of a book page. And the back has a vintage library pocket that I covered with pretty papers and some washi tapes and put this pretty blue library card in there. So this one is going to my customer, and I will do another video of the book that will be listed in my shop.